Hey guys, still here and welcome back to another Wargame Red Dragon video. Today I'm analyzing a replay, and this replay was sent in by a newer player. I recently did a stream. You can find the stream on my live section, so you can watch the whole thing at once or in chunks as you please. This is one of the sections that I highlighted. It is a 1v1, it's a player versus a computer player on death row. Now, before you all start complaining in the comment section, why the fuck are you covering a video about a person playing a computer? Well, it's a newer player. He's trying to figure out what to do and what not to do. It is part of a stream, which means that on the right-hand side, you'll see a small chat box. That way people can also submit their suggestions about what this player can improve. And of course, if you have some further suggestions, please put those down below in the comment section. I hope you find these things useful. If you do, then please like them. That way more people can find them. And of course, more of these sorts of videos are coming up, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hope you enjoy. I'm going to be doing some replay reviews so that I can hopefully help out some of the new players who are struggling with Wargame, trying to figure out what to do, what not to do, what to focus on. I am not the best player of Wargame at all. Definitely not. For that, you should have a look at Razman's channel. He is a way better player than I am. But as far as I know, he doesn't really do replay analyses like this. I think he should. I think it could be a really useful asset to the community like that. But hey, I'm here, so I might as well try and do it. Anyway, the USS Torsk over here on death row against a computer. Right, death row. Very straightforward map, because you really only have this, well, actually these two main roads. I'm going to start using the Epic Pen, if it wants to successfully function for me. Pen, yep, that works, and that works. Excellent. Okay. Now, we have the Leclercs over there. He's playing as France, I think. No, not France, El Toscado. Of course, the AI doesn't spawn anything in. First thing I'm looking at when I'm looking at a map like this is what assets do I need to bring and what positions do I need to capture? And pretty much in reverse. What positions do I want to capture? And how am I going to capture those positions? In this map, or on this map, you got pretty much the whole town over there that you would ideally capture. It's just not always going to be that easy. It's not just you drive into town and you capture it, because the enemy is going to do the exact same thing from the opposite side. So it is going to be a clash of infantry. That's what it's going to come down to. It's not going to be pretty. You're going to lose a lot of units. That's alright, so long as you keep sending in infantry. And it has to be something that's not too expensive. Don't make your deck consist solely of special forces or commandos or such, because it is not going to work. You're just going to run out of infantry because you don't have the availability. And not only that, but you also have the problem that your infantry is going to be too expensive relative to the other player. Or in this case, the computer. Now what I'm seeing Torsk do over here is curious. I'm seeing him send in a couple of Leclercs. These are the French main battle tanks. And the problem with this thing is that while it has a great rate of fire, it, like most tanks, does not do well in the town. So sending in two Leclercs, that is really expensive. That's a 330 point investment that you're not going to get back inside this town. Try to have a look at what units are most cost effective. And a Leclerc in here is not it. Over on the other side, we're seeing Martyr 1A3, Slipper 2. I would move the Leclercs from there to here. Tiger, anti-air, Lars, another Lars. Okay. Let's speed up deployment, see what he's going to be doing. Another Tiger. He has a lot of starting points. Damn. Okay, first thing you do when you start the game, select everything, drag a box around it, and tell it to fast move. Normally fast move, I think, is not bound to an ideal key. I have it to F, which I think you have to manually set it. You have to override it, otherwise it doesn't work. And what I do is usually the same thing. I select everything, I press F, and I click here, for example. I do the same thing with the other guys over there. Because all the time that you spend not moving your units is time that the enemy has to dig in, to find a position, and just to start getting ready for your units. Which is really not what you want them to do. Now, of course, the AI here is a terrible example because they generally don't do anything. Or at least, if they do something, they're going to come at you with quad stacks of everything. Ideally, have everything fast move and just sort it out along the way. So just drag a box around it, sort it out as it is moving. That's a far easier way of going about it. Interesting use here of smoke. That's what the Lars were doing. The Lars were apparently just there to throw down a big smoke screen, but how do you benefit? I'm going to pause it here for a second. See, the smoke over here doesn't really do that much, because the smoke over here is not thick enough to really obstruct view from anywhere. The smoke over here, similar problem. It just doesn't do enough. If you were actually bringing in units that you wanted to rush through here, then still smoke wouldn't really be useful. If you want to go on an offensive like this, I would recommend that you throw a high explosive down here, because you might actually hit something as it's coming towards the town. That's a far better use of your artillery, and thus pretty expensive resources. From the game there are no sounds. Oh, great. That is not intended. Got the tiger moving here. And the tiger moving there. This is good. He's covering his flanks here, especially here. But this tiger cannot see everything that's coming down here. And if you have a player that uses a helicopter rush, they could just come at you from the side. And as opposed to other maps, it's vitally critical to control Foxtrot and maintain control of Foxtrot, which is currently not done. You have your two Lars, but that is it. And because of it, well, it's just a big prize waiting to happen. The smoke is actually going to hurt him shooting at enemy reinforcements. Yes. Serious Strategy Gamer in chat, welcome. One of the regulars at Taskmaster Tuesday. Welcome, good sir. You have to be fucking kidding me. Is my neighbor going to pick this time to start doing reconstruction of the house? See, in this case, he's getting away with using the Leclercs. But under virtually any other circumstance, if you're facing a player, it is going to be death for the Leclercs. If you have, for example, the counterpart to the Panzer Grenadier, so VDV-90, for example, then they're also going to have a really high armor-piercing value. Not strictly 24, I think it's 23 for them. But these Leclercs will get shot at a lot, and they will start dying very quickly. So this is something that I would really not recommend. If you want to use Leclercs, and you can, but just make sure you send them over here. And then try and let's sort of dash in and out of this side here. Intercept and shoot anything that comes along this road. If you do it like that, you have a far better chance of intercepting reinforcements and making sure that nobody gets to the town. The AI is dumb as a bunch of rocks and does not deviate from the road. That makes them predictable. It's nice. But when you're looking at players, they're going to deviate as much as possible. They don't want to be predictable. Also, in this case, I understand that the Leclercs are together because they're both trying to get shots at whatever comes down the road. But they, as you could see, were one big target for an artillery or airstrike. So try and split them up a little bit. The helo on the right-hand side died. Oh, that must have been the plane train that we saw earlier. A whole flight of aircraft came out and wiped out both reconnaissance helicopters. So while you have your AMX-10 here and there, your flanks are wide open. And that is really freaking risky. It doesn't even take a heli rush. It can just be one helicopter dropping off one special forces group. And if they get through, you're either going to lose your CV, or you're going to start losing artillery because it gets spotted and then shot at. It's very, very dangerous to leave your flanks exposed like this. Now, for example, a Marder 183 that you're not using in here could be an interesting and cheap picket line because you in effect already paid for it. So split these things up. And let's say if you go here, just set one up there, there, and there. Maybe here, all the way on the edge here. But, well, it might be a helicopter that comes over, but it'll probably get spotted by the third one. But make sure you have a picket line. And especially helicopters, empty transport helicopters are a great use of that. Since you don't really use them for anything else anyway. 264 BVIs are coming in. You got... I'm not sure if you're relocating the Panzer Grenadiers, but make sure you have your infantry inside of a building at all times. Same for these guys. These are moving up. These are falling back. Okay, you're cycling your infantry. I like that. This is a block that's slightly farther ahead, and by a block, I mean a block of buildings. So make sure that you keep an eye on what blocks are close and what blocks are not. Because if they're too far away, like this, you're going to have to take a lot of fire to get there. Okay, pull these guys out. Bring in the new Panzer Grenadiers. Some recon in this city would help. Yeah, I don't think he can see a whole lot. The AI is absolutely blind, but then again, it doesn't really rely upon spotting that much, because it knows exactly where all of your units are. Oh, no. No, 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 no. Again, it's the AI. You can get away with it. If it's a player, these leopards, they're going to move in this direction. What's going to happen is that the enemy can have shots from here and from all of these buildings over here. So these are going to shoot that way, and these are going to shoot this way. Your tank has very strong frontal armor. Side armor, not so much. So be careful, because they will get shot on the side. And when that happens, a 130-point tank can get eliminated very quickly. Do not send your units into town. Not your tanks. There are some exceptions. For example, the MBT-70. That is one that can work. Now he's getting a lot of kills because it's the AI. But if this was a player, you'd be in trouble. Also, the MX-10RC here can probably spot some stuff. But not that much. And this whole road here is basically a disaster waiting to happen. Because anything can start rushing down this road and you wouldn't really see it. Flak Panzer Gepard A2, A1, okay. If you have our artillery, NTR artillery that is, so AAA, make sure you have them all selected and then press H. H disables their weapons, and especially if you have an icon like that with an R, it means it's radar guided. It can and will get picked up by SEAD aircraft. Suppression of enemy air defenses. Those things are only there to pick off your anti-air defenses so that enemy bombers can come in. Most of the time, those SEAD missiles are carried by planes. Some of the time, they're carried by helicopters. Some Russian helicopter, the K-52 has them. And yes, some of these things have stingers, so don't turn those off. Keep those on because they're infrared. But when it says radar, turn that off. Because especially when you're fighting in a town like this, you're going to be diverting your attention constantly. You're going to be focused on what's happening here. What infantry do I need to pull back? Do I still need to send in a new logistics unit? Do I still need to have these guys get reinforced? And in the meanwhile, the enemy sends in a couple of SEAD aircraft, wipes out your anti-air defenses, and then comes in with a bomber. And if it's a North Korean deck, that sends in the B-5, which is one of the heaviest bombers in the game. Well, soon you won't have any Panzer Grenadiers to micromanage because they'll all be gone. Those B-5s in a situation like this can be really deadly. Would setting up some mortars in the building along the main road work to block it from the infantry? You don't set up mortars inside of a building. Mortars, ideally, at least I keep them on the road. Because when you keep them on the road or next to a road, they're quick to shoot and scoot. So they're quick to deploy and then move. Use a couple of shots from them and then move them away before they get counter-artillery fire. Avia 28 as well. Yes, Raymond, absolutely. The Avia 28 can do exactly the same thing. And it's going to be very, very deadly. He just sent in a Mirage 5F to do a bombing run. The way that I treat aircraft, depending on the aircraft, is as always trying to make a trade-off. The amount of points that I'm going to get with that airstrike. Suppose I lose the aircraft. Is that going to live up to it? Yes or no? Is that going to be useful? Yes or no? If you're able to kill a command vehicle, for example, then you're bound to get 100 points, sometimes more if it's a command tank. But when you're just bombing 1 or 2 units of infantry, and those infantry are worth 10, 15 points, so you're scoring 30 points, but you lose the plane, it's going to be the end of your plane. Let's say that the end of the plane is 100 points. You effectively lost 70 points in that trade. You might kill the infantry, and if it's absolutely critical that the infantry dies so that, I don't know, your tank can move up or your tank can survive, sure, go for it. But if not, then please be very careful with planes. Too often have I seen people use aircraft, not careful enough, and they just get killed off. And your team starts losing points. Because in this case, he's playing destruction. Those points currently are only his because he's the only player. But if you have multiple people on a team, this goes for the entire team. And I've seen people just throw away a game simply by not having, let's say, not having the common sense of where to send aircraft. Sometimes it is useful to to use a cheap plane to kill something to clear the way for a more effective strike. Yes, I agree. Knowing when that is and when that is not a good time is tricky. It's a skill. It's something that you can learn. Check out replays of your own battles. That way you can very quickly see, okay, what went well, what did not go well. Also something that happens over here. This is going to look glorious when an enemy plane shows up. When an enemy artillery unit shows up and spots that all the NTR are fired from here, they're going to get a lot of counter-artillery, or they're going to get a lot of cluster shells, for example. And that's going to wipe out all your anti-air. At least these 4. This one might survive, but it's not in cover. So it is likely to also start taking attention from, I don't know, an HGM team over there, a tank, a seed aircraft. It could be anything. It could be any number of things. Now this is very dangerous. You know that they have a T-80. Pull the Leopard back. Another Leopard 2. Jesus, this guy's bold. We went from playing Wargame to playing World of Tanks right quick. Just a couple of tanks doing a drive-by, and there we go. This T-80U just took out a Leopard 2 and a Leopard 2A4. That is quite expensive. Pull your tanks back, let your infantry handle it. Geez, not enough HEGMs for you. BRDM. HEGMs in this position are not very useful. Yes, they were able to take out the Buratino, but they don't have a great line of sight. They can target this tiny area because they got the building here and the building block over there that's blocking them. And then you can target this narrow corridor. So your field of fire is very restricted, and that means that this position is not great for them. If you were to put your units here, for example, then you would have a pretty decent field of fire. You can have your units fire HGMs at all the stuff that comes through here. Actually, a bit more, but I didn't quite draw it out quickly. And of course, out to here, but most of the stuff should get spotted and killed off there. Let's move on. Also, units that are grouped, like your artillery, but also like your HGMs here, are just going to attract attention, especially from players. Using artillery, cluster weapons, high-end bombs, stuff like that is about to get very, very dead. That was a classic AI move, sending in an Su-27S to kill a Tiger Hap and not even completing that. Send your Tiger Hap back. This thing is far too heavily damaged and too expensive not to get repaired. Spread your AA units out in groups of only 2 at the largest in one spot. Yes. And even 2 anti-air units sometimes is too big of a threat. When I'm playing tacticals, or when I used to play tacticals, I usually go with 2 Patriots together. Because you can just very quickly wipe out an enemy anti-air unit, but that is already somewhat dangerous. Because 2 Patriots is pretty expensive. Whoops, that was a Tunguska. There goes the Tiger Hap. Nice use of the mortars here to wipe out incoming units. Keep in mind that an enemy player might not appreciate this and will not just sit idly by as all his units get wiped out as they get into the town. So it's very likely that they're going to send in a tank, and that's going to wipe out your mortars very quickly. Since you have a a French-German deck, I would try and bring Legionnaires to this building, because the Legionnaires have a shorter range ATGM, a shorter range anti-tank missile. It does about 1,000 meter range. And that means you can, I think, just about get to this tree line, which means that you can very quickly wipe out anything that comes in through here. So, for example, one section of Legionnaire there, and one section of Rima over there, or Panzer Grenadier, whichever you prefer, and you will very quickly wipe them out. T-34-85s. This is not something that a player would generally do. They would not send you 1 T-34-85, they would send you 16 at a time. There we go. Job done, but risky. Against a player, this would probably not work. Stuff to focus on next time. I usually recommend that people don't focus on 15 things at a time, even though you get a whole lot of suggestions. Focus on one thing at a time. Focus on stuff that you can easily fix in another game. Like, for example, working with your anti-air. Making sure you don't have them all bunched up, but just one anti-air here, another anti-air there. Just spread them out a little bit. Something like that would be a lot safer. All right, that's going to conclude this one.